All right, so you're really looking to dive deep into Spinoza.
Yeah.
And I got to say, looking over the notes and articles that you sent over, this guy's story is pretty fascinating.
It is.
Especially that whole excommunication thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Definitely adds a bit of intrigue to his life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, getting kicked out of your community like that.
Right.
There's got to be a story there.
Oh, there's definitely a story.
So, before we get into all that drama,
Sure.
let's set the stage a bit.
Okay.
Spinoza, born in Amsterdam, 1632,
Right.
raised in a Jewish community.
Yep.
Gets a pretty solid education, traditional thought, but he's also drawn to like science and lens grinding.
Interesting.
Can you imagine?
It's an interesting combination.
This philosopher like meticulously crafting lenses,
Yeah.
maybe pondering the nature of reality as he's polishing the glass.
Yeah, it really speaks to a mind that wasn't afraid to bridge those two seemingly separate worlds, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And you could definitely see that reflected in his philosophy too.
Oh, absolutely.
Where he's, trying to kind of reconcile the material world with the spiritual.
Yeah, he was reading Descartes, right?
Yes. And that seemed to have been like a major turning point for him.
It was for many philosophers of that time.
It's like reading Descartes just kind of cracked open this whole new way of looking at the world for him.
I can see that.
But instead of just like accepting Descartes' ideas,
Yeah.
he took them and like ran with them in this totally different direction.
A direction that shocked a lot of people.
Yeah, well, because Descartes was arguing that the mind and body were these distinct substances.
Yes, separate entities.
Right. And Spinoza comes along and he's like,
kicks it a step further.
well, what if there's only one substance?
Right.
And that's where his whole substance monism thing comes in.
Exactly.
This idea that like everything that exists,
Everything we experience.
it's all just a modification of this one fundamental substance.
It's all connected.
So instead of two separate things like mind and body, Spinoza's saying it's all just one big cosmic ocean.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, and it's one of the things that got him in trouble with the religious authorities.
Oh, right.
Because he was essentially saying that God and nature are the same thing.
So like pantheism?
Exactly. Remember that article you shared about pantheism?
Yeah.
Spinoza's philosophy is a perfect example of that.
Makes sense.
He called it devusive natura.
God or nature.
Yeah, basically saying that the divine is woven into the fabric of existence itself.
Wow, that's a far cry from the personal God of, traditional religion.
It is a significant departure.
So how did this all play out with his excommunication?
Well, when he was 23, they issued a herem.
Okay.
This wasn't just like a slap on the wrist or anything.
No.
This was a total ban from the Jewish community.
Wow.
And the reasons they gave were pretty vague.
Really?
Yeah. Abominable heresies and monstrous deeds.
This is pretty intense.
It does, doesn't it? Like something straight out of the Inquisition.
Totally. So, I mean, it must have been incredibly isolating for him.
Oh, absolutely.
But you mentioned earlier that this experience, in a way, kind of liberated him.
It did in a sense, because now he was free to develop his own ideas without the constraints of the community.
Right.
And one of the most powerful concepts he developed was conatus.
Yes. I highlighted this term in my notes.
I saw that.
It definitely caught my attention.
It's a fascinating concept.
It's this idea that everything, like from humans to rocks to plants.
Everything has this inherent drive to persevere in its being.
So it's like a built-in will to exist.
To thrive.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's not just about survival, though.
No.
It's about striving to become the most complete and perfect version of yourself.
Oh, wow.
And this conatus is tied to Spinoza's view of what's good and evil.
Interesting. How so?
Well, he argued that what's good for us is what helps us fulfill our conatus.
Yeah, okay.
What allows us to flourish.
I see.
And what's evil is what hinders it.
So it's not about following like a set of rules
No.
handed down from on high or something.
Not in the traditional sense.
It's more about understanding your own nature, your
Right.
own drive to be.
And acting in a way that supports that.
Yeah.
It's ethics grounded in understanding yourself and the world around you.
That's a pretty radical departure from the traditional view of morality.
It is a different perspective.
So we've got this excommunicated philosopher
Right.
challenging these conventional ideas about God
Nature.
and even good and evil.
Yeah.
Where does this lead him next?
Well, this is where he really starts digging into the nature of reality and what it means to be human.
Okay.
And this leads him to some pretty startling conclusions.
Oh.
You remember that note you made about determinism?
Yeah, determinism.
That one's a real head scratcher.
It is.
It always has been.
Yeah, determinism. It's It's hard to wrap my head around the idea that, like, everything is predetermined.
I get that.
Does that mean we have no real choice in our actions?
Well, that's the question that's haunted philosophers for centuries, right? And Spinoza's answer might surprise you. He believed that everything in the universe, including our thoughts and actions, is causally determined.
Everything.
Everything. It's like a chain reaction.
Okay.
One event leading inevitably to the next.
So, like, if I stub my toe right now, that was, like, fated to happen.
According to Spinoza, yes. But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
He doesn't see determinism as a denial of freedom.
Really?
In fact, he argues that true freedom lies in understanding the causal chain.
So it's not about breaking free from the chain, but understanding it.
That's a good way to put it.
That's a pretty mind-bending concept.
It is, but think of it like this. You highlighted a quote from Viktor Frankl in your notes.
Yeah. Between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Right.
In that space is our power to choose our response.
Exactly. Spinoza would agree with that sentiment.
He would.
Oh, yeah. However, he would also argue that the way we choose our response is itself shaped by our nature and the causal forces acting upon us.
Okay, so I can see how that aligns with his idea of conatus, our inherent drive to persist and flourish.
Right. We're not just passively reacting to the world.
Yeah.
We're actively striving, even if that striving is itself determined.
Precisely. And for Spinoza, that striving is what gives our lives meaning and purpose.
Exactly. It's not about rebelling against a predetermined fate.
It's about embracing our place in the grand scheme of things.
Beautifully put.
That makes me think about something you mentioned earlier about his idea that God and nature are one and the same.
Yeah.
Is that part of what gives him a sense of peace with determinism?
I think so.
Like, if everything is unfolding according to laws of nature, and those laws are ultimately divine,
Yeah.
then maybe it's not so scary.
That's a very insightful connection. Spinoza saw the universe as this unified whole governed by rational laws. And while he acknowledged that this might seem to limit our freedom on the surface,
Right.
he argued that it actually opened up a deeper kind of freedom.
A deeper kind of freedom.
The freedom to understand our place in the cosmos, to act in accordance with our nature, and to find joy in the unfolding of things.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all fits together, but let's be honest.
Sure.
Determinism is still a tough pill to swallow.
I understand.
It can feel like it takes away our sense of agency, our ability to make a real difference in the world.
I get that feeling, but Spinoza would argue that we do make a difference even if our actions are determined. Every action we take has consequences, right?
Right.
And those consequences ripple out into the universe, contributing to the ongoing chain of cause and effect.
So it's like, even if my choices are predetermined, they still matter.
Yes, because they're part of this grand tapestry of existence.
Exactly. And remember, Spinoza's concept of freedom isn't about random, arbitrary choices.
No, it's not about chaos.
It's about understanding ourselves and the world around us.
Right.
So that our actions are in harmony with our nature.
And the nature of things.
This all ties back to his emphasis on reason, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
He believed that the more we understand, the more free we become.
For Spinoza, reason was the key to unlocking true freedom and happiness.
Interesting.
He believed that by understanding the laws of nature, including the laws that govern human behavior, we could liberate ourselves from the tyranny of our passions and live more fulfilling lives.
It's interesting how this idea of reason connects him to the Enlightenment.
There's a definite connection there.
He was writing well before the Enlightenment really took off.
Yeah, he was a bit ahead of his time.
But in a way, he was laying the groundwork for many of its core values.
You're right. Spinoza was a major influence on the Enlightenment, even though he was often considered a controversial figure in his own time.
Makes sense.
His emphasis on reason, individual liberty, and the separation of church and state resonated with many Enlightenment thinkers.
Oh yeah, they were all about creating a more just and rational society.
Exactly.
That brings to mind his book, Tractatus Theologico-Politicus.
Ah, yes, the Tractatus.
In your notes, you mentioned how relevant his ideas on the separation of church and state feel even today.
It's remarkable how much his ideas still resonate.
Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. In the Tractatus, Spinoza argued that religious authority should not interfere with matters of governance.
Okay.
He believed that freedom of thought and expression were essential for a healthy society.
Makes sense.
And that giving religious institutions power over political matters would inevitably lead to tyranny.
So even back in the 17th century, he was making the case for secularism.
He was. And what's remarkable is how relevant those arguments remain today.
Wow.
We're still grappling with questions about the role of religion in public life, the limits of free speech, and the balance of power between individual liberty and the authority of the state.
Yeah, those are big questions.
They are, and Spinoza's ideas offer a powerful framework for thinking through these complex issues.
It's fascinating how a philosopher who was ostracized in his own time could have such a lasting impact on the way we think about these fundamental questions.
He was truly ahead of his time.
He was. So we've talked about Spinoza's radical ideas about God,
nature,
and freedom. We've explored his influence on the Enlightenment.
And the enduring relevance of his political thought.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle that I'm curious to explore.
Okay.
In your notes, you mentioned that you're intrigued by how Spinoza's philosophy can be applied to modern life.
I am.
Can you elaborate on that?
Of course. While Spinoza's philosophy is often seen as complex and abstract, his insights into human nature, emotions, and the pursuit of happiness are remarkably applicable to our everyday lives.
That's what I'm really interested in.
I understand.
How can we take these big philosophical ideas and make them practical?
Yeah.
Something we can actually use to navigate the challenges of the 21st century.
Now that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Like, how can we take this 17th century philosopher and make him like our life coach?
Maybe not a life coach, but Spinoza does offer some powerful tools for navigating the, complexities of modern life.
Okay.
For example, think about all the stress and anxiety we face today.
Oh, yeah.
Spinoza would say that much of this stems from a misunderstanding of our own nature and our place in the world.
Because we're constantly striving for things that are like outside of our control.
Exactly. We get caught up in external desires in the pursuit of wealth, status, fleeting pleasures.
Right.
But Spinoza argued that true happiness, or what he called blessedness,
Blessedness,
comes from aligning ourselves with our own nature, with our conatus.
So instead of chasing external validation, we should be focusing on what makes us feel like truly fulfilled.
That's the idea. It's about understanding what brings us joy, what nourishes our soul, and pursuing those things with passion and purpose.
Okay.
Remember, conatus isn't just about survival. It's about flourishing.
Yeah.
About becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be.
That reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about Spinoza's views on emotions.
Okay.
He wasn't a fan of just suppressing our feelings, was he?
Not at all. In fact, he believed that understanding our emotions was key to living a more rational and fulfilling life.
Okay.
He argued that we can transform negative emotions by understanding their root causes.
So instead of just trying to ignore anger or sadness, we should dig deeper and ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way? What's the underlying cause?
Exactly. And often those root causes are tied to external desires. To things that are ultimately outside of our control.
Right.
By recognizing this, we can start to detach from those desires and cultivate more positive emotional states.
This is starting to sound a lot like mindfulness or cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
Those modern approaches that emphasize recognizing and managing our thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
It's like Spinoza was a proto-therapist.
He certainly was ahead of his time in many ways. And his insights into the nature of emotions are remarkably relevant today.
I can see that.
In a world that's constantly bombarding us with information and stimulation, it's more important than ever to cultivate a sense of inner peace and emotional balance.
Totally. So Spinoza's philosophy can help us with stress anxiety, even our emotional well-being. What about our relationships with others? Does he have anything to say about that?
Absolutely. One of the key implications of Spinoza's philosophy is that we're all interconnected.
Okay.
Remember, he saw the universe as a single substance, with everything and everyone being a modification of that substance.
Right.
This means that our actions and our well-being are inextricably linked to the well-being of others.
So it's not just about focusing on ourselves.
No.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness with everyone and everything around us.
Exactly. Spinoza argued that acting ethically, treating others with kindness and compassion is not just a moral imperative, it's also in our own self-interest. When we harm others, we ultimately harm ourselves because we're all part of the same fabric of existence.
It's like that old saying, no man is an island.
Right.
Spinoza would definitely agree with that.
He would. And this insight has profound implications for how we live our lives, how we interact with others, and how we build a more just and compassionate world.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how Spinoza's philosophy, even though it's rooted in 17th century thought, can offer us a fresh perspective on the challenges we face today.
That's the beauty of great philosophy.
Yeah.
It transcends its own time,
It does.
speaking to us across the centuries,
Yeah.
offering timeless wisdom that can help us navigate the complexities of human existence.
Well, I think we've given our listener a lot to ponder today.
I hope so.
We've explored Spinoza's unconventional life, his radical ideas, and how those ideas can still resonate with us today.
Absolutely. And I hope we've sparked a deeper curiosity about this fascinating thinker.
Me too.
Yeah.
And perhaps most importantly, we've seen how philosophy isn't just an abstract pursuit.
Right.
It's something that can inform our lives, our choices, and our understanding of the world around us.
Well said.
So to our listener, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep. There's a whole universe of knowledge out there waiting to be discovered. And until next time, happy exploring.